Thank you for the invitation. My name is Benjamin Prado, Unión del Barrio. To give you a little bit of an understanding of who we are so the message is clear, we'd like to just give you a context of what we struggle for. Unión del Barrio was founded in 1981 by veterans of the Chicano power movement of the 60s and 70s. Organizations such as the Brown Berets de Aztlán, the Chicano Rights, the Committee for Chicano Rights, MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicano de Aztlán, and organizations such as the Partido Nacional de la Raza Unida. These were the organizations and veterans that came out of the Chicano power movement, knowing and recognizing that our original struggle, that the demands of the Chicano movement were correct and righteous, that in fact our struggle is a struggle for land, for self-determination, and for socialism. That the demands for justice, dignity, and self-determination were manifested in our ability to organize ourselves as a Mexican people, Mexican community, and to fight for our land that was stolen. We recognize that the United States is an illegal settler nation. That the United States as a nation is based and stands on a pedestal of genocide of the indigenous people, the theft of our land, and the enslavement of African people. And so we recognize that our struggle is a struggle to reclaim our humanity, to reclaim what is our stolen land and resources, so that we can build a nation that is based on the needs of human beings and not based on profit. And so to understand this this phenomena of human migration and this upsurge in what people call and term what the illegal settler state calls illegal immigration, we want to give the proper historical context of the issue. First, we recognize that it was the U.S. war and aggression against Mexico in 1846 through 1848 that began this onslaught and war specifically against the Mexican people. It began with the succession of Texas, which was white settlers' ability or want to expand slavery. That it was not this itch to try to go out and explore and be pioneers and explore new lands. It was precisely and specifically to expand slavery. And the reason why this conflict intensified was precisely because in Mexico, after it gained its independence from Spain, it was illegal. Slavery was illegal in Mexico. And so what we have is this theory and ideology of white power to specifically expand from sea to shining sea under an ideology of manifest destiny. I'm sure many of you and all of you know that theory of the God-given right to white people in particular to expand from sea to shining sea. We've heard it in our textbooks, right? Or at least not our textbooks, but the textbooks of the oppressor, right? And so the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended the war between this war of the United States against Mexico, the invasion of Mexico itself, called for at least three things. Number one, open borders, where the Mexican people and indigenous peoples can continue to cross freely. Respect for culture and culture and language, meaning that Spanish and other indigenous languages would be recognized. And water and land rights, where water will continue to flow freely through the Colorado River or whatever other rivers would flow through. Not one of these main points of this treaty has ever been respected. Like all treaties that the U.S. signed with indigenous nations, it has been breached and therefore is a continuation of this war against our communities. And so that's what this war and that's what this treaty represented, was the defining of the political borders of this illegal settler state. Mexico lost 55% of her national territory. The Gadsden Purchase was done as a maneuver to facilitate the expansion of railroads, and this border was created as a man-made structure, as a man-made political boundary. And just like man-made political boundaries can be done, they can also be undone.
That's right.
And so we want to explain just a little bit more about this issue of migration and how it's coming to pass. Because even though migration has historically existed, migration from north to south and from south to north has existed historically, especially amongst indigenous peoples. People would travel from one place to another in search for survival, in search for their needs. But since 1994 in particular, we're going to use that as a defining point, because that is the year that the North American Free Trade Agreement came into effect. It is the North American Free Trade Agreement imposed on Mexico, imposed on its people, that consolidated the new era of neoliberal imperialist policies, economic policies against our communities. Before NAFTA, migration was circular, meaning that workers would come to the United States, work several months, and then go back to their families, because the border was relatively open. People could cross with relative ease. There was no wall to speak of before 1994. People can simply walk across. In fact, it was a luxury to have a guide you across before 1994. After 1994, after when this wall came up, it was the same year, and I need to clarify, that 1994 was also the same year that a military strategy was put into place to stop people from crossing. It's called Operation Gatekeeper. It is the same year that walls were constructed, that while money and capital were being opened up and to freely cross back and forth through these borders, people, workers, were then subjected to dangerous conditions, because the urban areas along every major urban corridor along the border were sealed off. So as money and capital would be able to cross freely, human beings were not, workers were not. And it was very precisely calculated. This Operation Gatekeeper is a military strategy designed in the Pentagon. In fact, it was part of an immigration deal that happened in 1986. That it was part of the immigration deal that said, we will legalize an estimated 6 million people, but in exchange, we're going to militarize the border. We're going to restrict migration from north to south, from south to north. And so what happened to Mexico after 1994, and it's important to contextualize the devastation of NAFTA to the Mexican economy in particular, and to the general Latin American economies, is that NAFTA, in order for Mexico to enter into this economic policy, it had to eliminate Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution. How many of you know what Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution is? One person. One person. Okay, Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution was an article that was gained through the Mexican Revolution, through the battles and struggles of Emiliano Zapata in particular, and the rebel armies of Zapata and Pancho Villa. It was that piece of the Constitution that guaranteed communal land holdings called ejidos, where communities were guaranteed and families were guaranteed the ability to work the land, to be able to grow food, to be able to feed their families, to be able to put clothes on their backs, to be able to grow the food that they needed to survive.